Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, October 7th. I'm Jonathan Linden, in for Elizabeth Arkalian. A new law signed by Governor Gavin Newsom has set new standards for the placement of warehouse developments.
So this bill was hotly contested. It was really controversial for the way it was crafted.
Coming up, hear more on how these new rules could affect the Central Valley. But first, today's headlines. Avian influenza, also known as bird flu, has been detected in 2 San Joaquin Valley dairy workers and is suspected in a third. That's after the virus jumped from poultry to cattle earlier this year. Anya Rodenbaugh is CEO of the industry group Western United Dairies. She says dairy farmers everywhere are taking extra measures to limit contact between animals and humans. That includes providing workers with personal protective equipment like gloves and face shields and keeping delivery vehicles far from cattle.
This is definitely one of the biggest challenges we've ever faced in California as far as the dairy industry goes.
Symptoms of the virus in people have been mild. So far, there's been no evidence of person-to-person transmission. After being threatened with a lawsuit, the city of Clovis plans to consider changing how it elects its council members. The city council will meet today to vote on switching from at-large elections to district elections. The changes would start in 2026. Last month, a voting rights attorney threatened legal action against the city for its at-large elections. The attorney argued votes from minority residents were being diluted in the process. More heat records were broken this weekend in the San Joaquin Valley. On Sunday, Hanford, Merced, Fresno, and Madera all broke records for one of their hottest October days in decades. The cities were just about 1 or 2 degrees over their hottest days, some set back in the 1930s. The National Weather Service office in Hanford says normal temperatures for this time of year in places like Fresno are around the low 80s. Temperatures are expected to cool down by the end of this week. Californians will vote on 10 statewide ballot propositions this fall. Proposition 35 will put new guidelines around Medi-Cal spending to help secure better pay for doctors who serve low-income Californians. Kristen Wong with our partner Cal Matters has this explainer.
Prop 35 would require the state to use money from a tax on health insurance plans to boost payments to doctors who serve Medi-Cal patients. Over the last few years, the state has expanded Medi-Cal to cover more Californians than ever, now around 14 million people. But the amount that doctors get paid to treat Medi-Cal patients has not kept up with inflation. And as a result, many providers won't treat them, according to the California Healthcare Foundation. Supporters say Prop 35 will encourage doctors to serve more low-income patients because they'd be getting paid more for their services. Opponents worry putting restrictions on how the state spends this money could mean cuts to other Medi-Cal programs.
That was Kristen Wong with Cal Matters. Tonight, candidates for Fresno County's 3rd supervisorial district seat will face off in a forum co-hosted by Fresnoland and KVPR. The debate starts at 6 p.m. tonight in downtown Fresno. You can also catch a live stream of the forum online at cmac.tv or on CMAC's YouTube page. Fresno County District 3 oversees neighborhoods in South, Central, and Southeast Fresno. The event is also co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters and the Maddie Institute.
Getting rid of an old car can be a pain, especially if it's in disrepair. But fear not, the KVPR Vehicle Donation Program is here to help. We'll tow away that old vehicle and use the proceeds to support the news you rely on. And we accept all kinds of vehicles, including motorcycles, boats, and RVs. Learn more at kvpr.org/cars.
And now to our main story. Under a new law approved by Governor Gavin Newsom, cities and counties will be prohibited from approving new warehouse developments without meeting new specific rules. Assembly Bill 98 will require warehouses to be located only on major roadways and be set back several hundred feet from sensitive areas like homes and schools. Rebecca Plevin is an LA Times reporter who has been covering warehouse issues in the Central Valley and across Southern California. She joined host Elizabeth Arkalian for a conversation to unpack the inner workings of the law and where all these changes will have an impact.
So warehouses are a critical part of our global supply chain. And the warehouses we're talking about today are generally located in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside County, or the Central Valley. And these are places that are an easy drive from the ports of LA. And so a lot of our stuff, it comes into the ports, it goes from the ports to warehouses, typically by truck. And then we order things online, and that stuff makes its way from warehouses to our front doors. And so these warehouses are really a critical part when we, hit buy on, whatever e-commerce site. Like, the warehouses are a critical part of our stuff getting to our front doors. And the proliferation of warehouses really grew during the pandemic as e-commerce just exploded.
So what are some of the sort of specific rules that this new bill is mandating? And do we know when they're going to start taking effect?
So beginning in 2026, the bill mandates how far a proposed new or expanded development must be set back from these sensitive sites, again, homes, schools, healthcare facilities. And this law pertains to warehouses that are 250,000 square feet or larger and that are within 900 feet of homes, schools, healthcare facilities. And so in these cases, the bill requires that truck loading bays are located at least 300 feet from the property line in areas zoned for industrial use and 500 feet from the property line in areas not zoned for industrial use. Warehouses also need to comply with design and energy efficiency standards. They call them, 21st century warehouse design. And then it will also require cities and counties to update their general plans to identify and establish truck routes. And this needs to be done by 2028 statewide, except for within the Inland Empire, which will need to do this by 2026.
Okay, so have there been opponents to this bill? What are they saying?
So this bill was hotly contested. It was really controversial for the way it was crafted. It was developed by a warehouse working group, and bill co-author Juan Carrillo said it was developed through a delicate compromise. He said that in a hearing. And the bill language was released actually only in the last days of the legislative session. And so there were concerns that this bill was developed in secrecy without the participation of stakeholders. And so the bill was controversial from the very start. And so environmental justice advocates, community organizations are really concerned about those 300, 500-foot setbacks. They point to research from the State Air Resource Board, which estimated an 80% drop-off in pollutant concentrations at about 1,000 feet from a distribution center. And so these organizations say that 300, 500 feet is nowhere close to 1,000 feet, which is what the California Air Resources Board said was effective. Community organizations, they say that these setback requirements, 300 feet, 500 feet, that's already the status quo. And so this new law will actually make it harder for residents to advocate for better protections. And then cities are also upset by the law. An analysis from the state estimated that the required general plan updates I talked about for the truck routes, that could result in one-time costs for cities and counties ranging from tens of millions to potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. And so cities, counties, the League of California Cities are also opposed to this bill.
So what about warehouses that are already in existence? Are they going to be affected, or are companies going to have to make changes to those warehouses in any way?
Existing warehouses won't be impacted by the rules, but if a developer is looking to expand an existing warehouse, and that warehouse, again, is over 250,000 square feet, they'd be impacted. They'd have to, comply with the rules if they are 900 feet from one of these sensitive sites.
Okay, and as you mentioned, there are a lot of warehouses in the Inland Empire, largely because of that proximity to the ports in LA, but reports also show that warehouse expansions are happening here in the Central Valley, right?
That's right. I've reported that the warehouse industry is really growing in Kern County right now. In the Inland Empire, land is expensive. Some residents are getting really fed up with the growth of the logistics industry. They're sick of truck traffic on their highways and their neighborhoods. They're tired of the poor air quality. Many are concerned about whether warehouse jobs are in fact good jobs. At the same time, Kern County has plenty of open space, less traffic, cheaper land. I spoke with Kern County officials and developers who said they've seen what's happened in the Inland Empire with warehouse developments being built, near homes and schools. They said there's plenty of cheap open land in the valley, and so they can build these big million-square-foot warehouses that are away from homes and schools. And so Kern County is really embracing the growth of warehousing. And it comes at an interesting time for the valley and for Kern County. I found in my reporting that some farmers are frustrated by these state laws that will limit access to groundwater. And so they're selling their land or rezoning it for industrial uses, which generally means for warehousing. And I've spoken with farm workers who say that warehouse jobs are appealing. They're inside, they're out of the heat, they're away from dangerous pesticides. And so, it seems like the county, Kern County at least, is really embracing the growth of warehousing.
That was LA Times reporter Rebecca Plevin speaking with KVPR's Elizabeth Arkalian. The new warehouse regulations will go into effect statewide in 2028. And that does it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you have feedback or a story idea, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by me, Jonathan Linden, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.